The last 2 weeks of my life have been absolutely wild. And I've been in the thick of it, so I haven't been recording much of it. But I tell you, each day has been a deep dive into the divine furnace of transformation. And it's still going on. So, it has, I've reached a point where it's time for an update of sorts. I recorded a video in the mountains, which I will post before this one. So that has a little bit of the journey. But I want to talk a little bit about where I've been and what I've been doing and what is happening. And I must begin by saying that I went to a 5-day gathering, retreat gathering with 40 men, a men's gathering. And I went in with certain expectations, and the expectations were shattered. And yeah, I'm still not quite sure how to integrate it all, but one of the processes of integration is to speak about it. And so I'm going to tell you some of what happened. 5 days, 40 men. And not just any old men, not just any old boys, 40 powerful men. And essentially the second day, the first day was kind of just for landing, allowing the inner children to play, boys, playing sports, basketball, recess. And then the second day is when it got serious. And the second day is when I got this urge to pick up a staff and go walk through the field. My heart was on fire. And there was this mage, which I am, which called me to go and pray in the field with my staff. And I walked through the field as the mage. And I asked myself prayerfully, and I asked God, what is my vision? What is my purpose? What is the grand mission toward which I wish to build my path, my steps? A man needs a vision, and I have spent so much of my life purposeless, lacking the orientation of a grand vision, of a purpose, of a destiny toward which to walk. What came through, and I'll see how much of it I wish to keep reserved and how much of it I wish to share. What came through was this desire to harmonize my body and my heart and my soul so deeply with the earth and sky and with the heavens and with the numinous presence of God's breath within all things, with the ever-present symbiotic stream of chi, of energy that constitutes the homeostasis of our reality, to be in such harmonious relationship and relating with this omnipresent energy of God's breath, that I could walk through the world and march in particular directions, of which I will speak, and animals, lions, elephants, elk, bison, eagles, hawks, all kinds of beautiful animals, and the power animals at that, would feel magnetically drawn to walk beside me, to walk by my side. To be in this harmonious flow with nature where there can be some kind of intentionalized call, where I can call my kindred spirits, my kindred animals, my relations in to march with me towards particular, let's say, systems of anti-life mechanisms. Certain places where certain kinds of beings gather, and gather in such a way that is actually trying to tame and imprison and suppress and control and siphon and parasite. So there are certain places, physical places, that one might imagine, that I'm not going to name, but they could be pretty obvious. Like somewhere on the East Coast, or somewhere in Italy that isn't quite Italy, or somewhere in England, places like that. And to march with these animals, to march with these kin, to march with these living, breathing children of God, children of Gaia, children of Sophia, children of Zeus. And Zeus, Christ, Gaia, and Sophia showed up in this prayer to march with these beings, with the divine by our side, and to awaken this ability to so harmonize my energies with the energies of the earth and sky, so as to summon particular natural elemental proceedings, we might say, such as lightning, or storms, or floods. Floods here meaning not necessarily the ocean rising and flooding, but floods breaking open the hearts into a trillion tears shared by the collective. And here's the specific vision, which I will not shy away from saying. To raise my hand up into the sky and to cast, throw a lightning bolt, specifically, directly at the systems which are in need of death. For death is their obsession. So we give it to them, and firmly, with the divine by our side, tell them, time's up. You gotta go. We will no longer tolerate this. Scurry off, like the parasites you are. And upon the lightning strike, upon the reclamation contained therein, that is when the flood comes within the heart. For many of these beings who are operating within this severed form of consciousness, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They do not feel the pain that they inflict upon others and upon themselves. And with the strike of lightning come the rains and the floods, so that all the pain that they've inflicted, they can finally feel and cry. And the mythological floods, which are universal within the mythologies of humanity across all religions, maybe not all religions, but there are floods within the myths. And this is, oh my God, there is such a beautiful creature marching my way. I'll show you in a moment. The flood is one of emotion and compassion and healing, where we feel our pains together and individually in such a way that unbinds us from the pain, that releases the pain and the emotional depths from the body. I'm going to show you this little creature before it goes under the tree. Look at this little guy. Hello. Is this good? Can you see it? Hi, little guy. That's a friend. So, this emotional reclamation, that's the vision. This is day 2, which was really day 1. That night, I had a dream that I actually marched on one of these places, and I told them, hey, I'm going to be doing this, you best get ready. And they pulled out their, are you sure you're going to do that? We're going to punish you, we're going to resist you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And there were still little hints of fear in me, where I decided to say, oh, I was speaking in metaphor. When the vision itself, and the feeling in the vision weren't that metaphorical. So I've been sitting with the question of how to actually pursue such a vision. Because a lot of mental programming will say, oh, that's just silly daydreaming. That's not actually physically possible. And maybe it's not. Maybe it is supposed to be metaphor. Maybe I'm supposed to throw lightning bolts in the form of Sagittarian arrows. Parenthetically, there is a Sagittarius full moon in the sky, which is a perfect time to recollect this vision of which I'm speaking. Sagittarius, Jupiter, 10th house, all Jupiterian, Thor, Zeus, thrower of lightning energy. Tuning in and allowing myself to feel this celestial aspect of myself, which I wish to find a way to bring to life in whatever way. The next day, I'm gonna see, well, my phone may die. So if so, then I'll let the video end where it does and we'll continue at another point. The next day, the ceremony began with boxing. And we all circled up. We trained beforehand. And each man was paired up with another and was to enter his own fight, to relate to pain, to relate to the inner warrior, to relate to anger, and whatever else might come up. And in my 2 months in the solar plexus with this men's group, now we are in the heart center, but for the past 2 months before, we were in the solar plexus. I traced and discovered a somatically felt and repressed core wound right here, near my stomach, near my solar plexus. And it just so happened that in this fight, where I entered deciding I don't want to throw a punch, I'm not a fighter, I will just let this man hit me. Well, eventually I did end up throwing some punches. But I was punched right here in this somatically traced core wound. Not once, but twice. And it hurt. It hurt a lot. And it still hurts. 2 weeks later, my rib still feels like, whoa. Later that evening, after the fighting, the ceremony was to sit in silence for an hour and 15 minutes. In pure silence, 40 men gathered in the backyard. And I was sore like I've never been before, right here in this core wound. And every time that I've been meditating for the past however long, years, I've been feeling this kind of like energetic blockage here in this area. It's always been this thing that almost prevents the full flowing of energy, the fluidification of the breath, the harmonious flowing of energy within. And here in this silence after this fighting, that pain which I normally sit with and work through was just amplified times 10. And I was just there in this grueling pain this whole time, having to sit in silence with it. Some of the most grueling silence that you can imagine. Alone with my thoughts, alone with these pains, alone with this inability to speak, to avoid, to distract. Simply sitting with self in silence. The next day, deep meditation, guided breath work. And I'm going to shout out the dear brothers who have guided each of these ceremonies. You know who you are. Gratitude goes to you, Seth, Hutan, Manuel. First off, by this third day when the breathwork ceremony was happening, I had picked up some kind of cough, sickness, purgy thing, which I still am kind of recovering from. So not only was that silence with that pain, it was also with this like achy, feverish coughing. The next day, enter into meditation. All kinds of subtle visions of the inner feminine presence and inner masculine presence, and all of my ancestral streams coming together in their masculine feminine polarities, and how my parents each gave me, offered me, when they birthed me, when they gave me life, they also handed me their pain, and they were like, here you go, this was too much for us to handle, you're gonna have to handle it. And I saw exactly what was happening there, and I saw how when a man and a woman come together, they birth the innocent infant that is Christ. And that innocent infant must grow into a man who inherits the cross and must carry his cross and must be hung on the cross and crucified and die with his pain, and then from that death be purified in resurrection. And this archetypal energetic imprint of Christ, which humanity carries in each individual human being. Something along those lines. I felt it, I saw it in this mystical, deeply breathed visualization within myself. And I felt how in sitting with this pain right here, in sitting with other pains that are connected to it, I was embodying that archetypal charge. I was on my cross, dying. All of this sickness, all of this pain, all of this purging is this process of dying on the cross. Now, I'm not calling myself Christ in some egoic way. I'm calling upon the universal Christ, which breathed himself teleologically and as logos, breath, into each of our soul imprints, so that each of us might embody this death and resurrection process and come closer to divine union with the Sacred Father in heaven. Now, parenthetically, I do carry semblances of fear about speaking on this question of Christ with any kind of authority. This is what I perceived in the subtle visionary state of meditation. I do not proclaim it to be absolute truth. I'm speaking to my experience, and I'm speaking to my processing of the experience and how I am dying on my own cross, and I'm carrying my cross with the intention of coming closer to God. As I'm sitting with this pain during this meditation, I think back to the lightning, to the casting of lightning, and how do I do it? How do I actually embody this vision, which seems so grand, seems so almost impossible? And I realized in that moment that in some energetic way I could cast the lightning at my own self, cast my lightning at all of the places within my body, within my wounds, where I might be enmeshed with the certain kinds of anti-life energies of which I was speaking earlier. Where am I still contractually and constrictively in relation with these places, and can I fucking throw lightning bolts at my own self to shake things up and to clear away any parasitic imprints, let us say. And so I did that. And I felt certain things which took the form of great anger. Anger at the imprints of fallenness which I carry within myself, and this fucking warrior Jupiterian lightning strike which I just threw at my own self, and I released in the form of a warrior's anger. Not, well, it likely is a wounded anger in some ways, but in other ways, like a righteous anger that is like, you fucking parasitic forms of energy that still exist in our realm, like, you need to go. This is no longer to be tolerated. Enough is enough. Lightning strikes and floods. I can't remember the exact flow of all of this, but after this, I was feeling it. Like, the sickness, the purging, the pain, and I just accepted, like, man, I wish I was more energized. I wish I had more like thumos and willpower to do all of this and to have a more normal, embodied, enlivened experience. But God wanted me to sit with pain and purging And so much of my journey was also just like being sick and like dying. And the other very significant breathwork ceremony that happened after this was a very intense one where once again I had subtle remembrance visions of particular encounters that I have had with certain anti-life adversarial forms of being, and once again like throwing the lightning at the places in myself where these things still have control over me, still have influence over me, still sway my will away from divinity and towards the co-creation of whatever the fuck they want to do. Now, I'm going to talk about this. I'm just going to touch on it. We'll see how deep I go. In this ceremony, in this breath work, there was like imprints of the years and years and years that I spent enmeshed in pornography, and how pornography hooked itself through my lust, which is ultimately a desire for loving union, but misguided, and hooked itself into my being. It is such a deep aspect of my journey, which I will not get into right now. But the anger and the warrior within me that came out from that was like, we need to eradicate pornography from this reality. And I will just express here and now that I've not touched it this year. And I've cut it out of my reality. It had been a struggle until then. It was still like fighting for its life, for its sustenance within my heart. And I have since cleared it. And I have since vowed to God that I will not look at that parasitic form of energy again, except perhaps to fucking banish it and throw lightning at it. But, side note, if you still engage with these realms, know that the darkness that those realms carry is so far beyond. Maybe you can imagine it, but most people do not imagine such darkness. It is not just about sex. It is not just about lust. It is not just about bodies. We are talking about an enmeshment with a multi-billion-dollar, You know how there are plasma donation centers, and those like are tied to a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the Red Cross and whatnot. These things are connected, and there are beings, principalities, and quote-unquote powers that feed upon pain, feed upon enslavement, feed upon blood, feed upon all kinds of extremely fucked up shit that goes on in that industry. And when you're feeding your life force, your creative seed, your creative essence to that is how they sustain themselves. That is actually what gives them life. That is actually what is giving life to so much of their dead systems. I digress. Perhaps I'll make a full video about this another time. That was the depth of that. I think I've covered most of what I want to talk about with regard to the gathering. There was more that came through. But essentially, I came in and a prayer showed up for my vision to present itself. And the vision was to throw lightning at falsity and destroy emanations of falsity with the truth of my breaths and of my heart breaking open into a trillion tears alongside my kin. And willfully, with Sagittarian, Jupiterian arrows, reclaiming so much of humanity from these systems. I think my phone's gonna die soon. So I'm sitting with this question still, though I'm also sitting with all kinds of fears with regard to how to bring this about. And in a world where a man can be killed, but an idea cannot, what is the most effective way of aiming and throwing the lightning bolt? And sitting with that question, one of the answers being, first, aim it within. And do it seriously. Like, annihilate the tolerance for forms of self-deceit that I've been tolerating in my life for far too long. At the very least, in the places where I have some kind of power and some ability to choose against them. And then in the places where I spoke of metaphor earlier, in the places where metaphor and reality intersect, in the places where I, as a man who carries the wand of language, how can I use my language to invite these lightning strikes into tangible material reality? In a way that inspires, and in a way that inspires also the floods of the tears, of the emotions. Sometimes on my typewriter in my typewriter poetry, people give me really deep topics about deep grief that they're experiencing. And my poetry invokes medicinal, tearful release, emotional release for these people. And so how to do such things in a way that is amplified and in a way that is also within. Because much of my writing practice, I go deep and I do the somatic work and the somatic healing of restoration from within. This is just the first 4 or 5 days of the last 2 weeks, which have been absolutely wild. And I'm gonna leave it at that for now, except to say that I always do this. I'm gonna finish it here, and then I talk for another 10 minutes. I expected that I would walk away from this retreat, from this gathering, full of drive, full of thumos, full of passion, full of readiness to take over and to really step into my purpose and to be so activated. But so much of what I've been needing to face since then is, first off, healing the sickness and the purging and the dying process that's been going on. And second off, a lot of fears that have been emerging, and a lot of hey, you thought you were gonna just walk right into heaven. Now you still have hells to confront, and you still have your demons to conquer, and you still have this, and you still have that. And it's been very confusing, and it's been very difficult, and it's been very challenging, and it's been what just happened? What was all this? What do I make of all this, and how do I now act from this place? So I'm still sitting with that. I'm still sitting with that. And the fears are coming to the surface from my heart in order to be confronted more deeply. And that is at least what I'm going through. And my mind has the ability to tell stories and blame and be like, oh, well, actually this wrong thing happened, and maybe this man did this, and maybe I did this wrong, and all these things that are bad are happening because my fears are emerging. So because my fears are emerging, I'm like, well, whose fault is it? And maybe it needs to not be like this. I need to change this. I'm just allowing myself to take accountability, take responsibility, and where do I go from here? How do I just better myself from here, and how do I do what I can from where I am? And how do I aim my lightning bolts at the fears and dissolve them with love? That's that. And we'll see if I continue this story another time. But I'm going to go flow into other things, offer some typewriter poems. Fare thee well. Thank you for listening, and I will post videos whenever I want to. Thank you. Much love and blessings be with you.